How's it going, everybody? I am DJ Riley, one of the hosts from Boys on the Bench, and I am here with my top 3 MLB picks to begin this MLB season. It is finally upon us, and I am here with my top 3 picks. Now, before we jump into this, I just wanted to say kind of what I will be using, the tools that I will be using in this, and it's Daily Grind Fantasy. It's a positive EV betting tool that I will kind of be referencing throughout this. And guys, it's been proven to be very highly efficient during this MLB season or the NBA season. I expect the same during this MLB season. So if you're looking to get kind of a discount here, I do have a code for you, BENCH, and that will get you 25% off of your first month. So make sure you're jumping on this because I have won so many units betting on positive EV and using Daily Grind Fantasy. So make sure you're jumping on it, but also using Props.Cash. All of that is listed below. Props.Cash is just a historical data value that you will see through my models and all of these picks below. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and jump into this. And really, the first pick that I have for you today is Nathan Eovaldi going over 1.5 walks allowed. He really, last year, as versus the Cubs team, he only had one game, and that was in an April 7th matchup. And in that game, he only had one walk over 5 2/3 innings of play. Daily Grind Fantasy, however, coming into this game, they're giving this a 53.5% chance of hitting with an average juice of -138. So we are really looking for that 54+% odds whenever we're looking at positive EV, but this coming in at 53.5 is really actually very good for us. Now, looking at recent performances, and of course, this is opening day. So we're having to go way back to, last season and how he performed. He hit this line in 2 out of his last 5, but then also 6 out of his last 10. Now, where I really like him is the Cubs were one of the most patient hitting teams last season, where Eovaldi saw some regression in terms of batters walked in this last season. Now, if we go back to the Cubs, we saw that they had the 6th most base on balls in all of the MLB last season, where on the other hand, Eovaldi had 47 base on balls last season, which was the second highest in his career. Now, the Chicago Cubs teams versus right-handed pitchers, their base on balls percentage was again the 6th most in all of the MLB. So I expect a lot of the same. I know Eovaldi was a very great pitcher last year, especially for this Rangers team, but I do expect a little bit of regression last year, just like we saw some regression this past season with him. So coming into this game, we're really only looking for 2 walks versus one of the most patient hitting teams in all of the MLB. So really love for him to go over 1.5 walks for today. Now, if we move on to the next pick that I have for you today, that is Ketel Marte going over 7.5 fantasy points. Now, if we look at how he's done versus Kyle Freeland, who is a left-handed pitcher, he has a batting average of 357, in which he has 12 hits, 3 home runs, and 6 RBIs. Now, Daily Grind Fantasy is giving this a 54% chance of hitting, with 2 books currently offering this at 8.5. Now, I really like him to go over this 1.5 total bases play, but right now, PrizePicks currently isn't offering that. The only thing that they're offering that really has any true value is this fantasy points play. I really like this, though, coming in at 7.5. So if we look at kind of his recent performances, though, Props.Cash doesn't break this down in terms of fantasy points scored. They don't calculate that on their end. So let's look at it in terms of total bases and that 1.5. And 1.5, he's hit this in 2 out of his last 5 and 6 out of his last 10. And even if we go look at his last 15, he's also hit this in 10 out of his last 15 games as well. Now, Ketel Marte was very dominant last season, and I fully expect that the same really this season. The same thing I also expect is that Freeland is going to have a very bad season, where we saw last season he allowed the 7th most hits in all of the NBA. So really, this is kind of working in Marte's advantage this season. Now, again, as I mentioned, if you do see this line opening up at over 1.5 total bases for Marte, that is probably my favorite bet for today. But I also love this 7.5 fantasy points as well. Ketel Marte versus these left-handed pitchers last season, he had a batting average of 315 and 5 home runs. And he's also, again, how I mentioned how successful he's been versus Freeland this season. I expect that to be the same on opening day. So give me Ketel Marte going over 7.5 fantasy points. But that does bring us to my next pick and my final pick for today. And that is Tim Anderson going over 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs. Doesn't have a history versus this Mitch Keller, who is a right-handed pitcher, doesn't have a head-to-head history versus him at all throughout his career. So this will be the first matchup. Now, if we look at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us, it's a 51.23% chance of hitting with an average juice of minus 126. So it's nearly a 50-50 split here. Everyone's kind of wondering how Tim Anderson's going to do as a Miami Marlins, and I expect it to be really good. Recent performances, though, looked at how he's done over his last 5 and his last 10 to end the season. He only hit this line in 1 out of his last 5 and 3 out of his last 10. Now, if you followed Anderson last year, you knew that he was a much better hitter versus left-handed pitchers versus right-handed pitchers. Well, I know Mitch Keller is a right-handed pitcher, so it's not necessarily working in his advantage because versus right-handed pitchers, he only batted 226, but versus left-handed pitchers, he batted over 300. So while this matchup doesn't look necessarily interesting up to this point, Mitch Keller has also given up the 7th most hits in all of the MLB last season. So yes, he's a decent pitcher, but he's giving up a ton of hits. And Anderson really is a very good hitter, and especially versus very bad pitchers. So yes, he may be a right-handed pitcher, but I really like him to go over 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs in this game. Although, again, not very successful versus right-handed pitchers with a 226 average and no home runs last year versus right-handed pitchers as well. But nonetheless, guys, these are my top 3 picks heading into opening day. As always, drop your favorite picks in the comments below. I really want to get on a heater. I want to drop a lot of money, but also make a lot of money on opening day of the MLB this season. Let me know which ones you're tailing, which ones you're fading, but also your favorite picks today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and get notified anytime these videos are dropping because they are coming out daily. Anyways, best of luck to y'all on opening day, and I will see y'all tomorrow.